to move away from this standalone hardware system.
This all sounds wonderful. Hello, my name is Amrita Sethi, and it's my pleasure to host the next episode of Endoscopy Essentials in one of the special partner episodes with Olympus. And many thanks to Thomas Roche for this opportunity. It's my pleasure today to speak with Dr. Rowan Cater. He's a gastroenterologist in the UK at London UCL. And he's an active researcher in AI, and particularly endoscopy. And he's going to share with us today a little bit about the future of the AI program that Olympus is working with, and just about AI and endoscopy in general.
Absolutely, and I think first of all I just want to say thank you for the kind invitation and opportunity to be here today. So I guess a little bit about my background is I've been involved in research, particularly for the translation of AI and endoscopy, since I think about 2019, and I've had experience in the full pipeline, so that's algorithm development, conceptualization, evaluation in the clinical arena, and then seeing that through for regulatory approval. So thank you for the opportunity today.
Sure. You know, I always find it interesting. AI is one area and endoscopy and gastroenterology completely separate. How did you arrive at the marriage of these two? Were you primarily involved in endoscopy and GI first and then discovered AI, or was your interest originally one? Share your story a little bit.
Absolutely. So I think so being British, I think we have a huge focus on quality in endoscopy. That's probably one of our main IPs, if you like. So I've always had a great passion for endoscopy. That's always what's gained my interest most when it comes to GI. And actually in the UK, we're kind of drilled into us to focus on the quality of the endoscopy procedures. And I think, particularly thinking back to 5-6 years ago, what really struck me is there's a lot of room for improvement in endoscopy. You know, it's far from a perfect science, if you like. And then naturally, when you had the advent of deep learning and then the big boom in 2018, the use of AI became a natural solution to some of those issues that really caught my interest. And I think that's really what sparked it all off for me.
Wonderful. And how did you see yourself where your future would go in terms of being able to apply your research when you first starting it, and how did you take it? Where did you go with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think initially with my research, I was quite focused on big data. So you know, typically looking at large volume of procedures, the traditional, if you like, human-led metrics. You know, for example, ADR. How robust is the solutions we have to it, stuff like monitoring withdrawal time, bowel prep. So I've always been very interested in big data, and then I think roughly around 2018, where I really developed my interest in the evolutions of machine learning, it became really apparent to me quite quick that the best use of big data is actually in these computer vision applications to be used in the endoscopy arena. So I just delved into that gradually, and then it kind of just married up as almost the perfect solution for how we can improve endoscopy.
And you found a company, or you found partners who had similar interests and could help you? How did you actually make that move to be able to develop a product?
Absolutely. So I did my research at University College London, and one of the centres which I did a lot of my research, it very much facilitated that type of innovative research, because within the same building you had clinicians and computer scientists, and I think that was one of the big strengths of that unit at UCL, because naturally as clinicians we can identify the problems, we can have a certain degree of understanding to what the solutions are, but then actually when you're sitting next to a whole host of computer scientists, you can actually leverage their expertise as well to try to find more superior outcomes than I would just be capable on my own as a clinician.
So, you entered at a time where AI is kind of being developed, but really there are a lot of AI applications and companies, and we have a lot of studies and a lot of data, and I think for the most part no one's doubting that this is our future. this particular product and this system, what tell us what about it sort of helps distinguish it from everything else that's out there?
So I would say the very first thing that comes to mind when it comes to the AI products under the Olympus portfolio, it's the only vendor at the moment that has cloud-based solutions. So what I mean by that is, traditionally with the deployment of AI in endoscopy, it uses a local hardware deployment. So you have a piece of kit such as a hardware or computer, and it's within the actual computer that the algorithm resides. That's connected to the endoscopy stack, and you have this closed loop circuit, if you like, for using the AI application. Whereas when we have this cloud-based workflow, the AI algorithm actually resides in the cloud. Okay, so image data is transferred to a hardware which goes up to the cloud using the hospital's internet. The AI algorithm processes that data within the cloud, and then if appropriate, feeds back, if it's CAD-E, for example, a bounding box. So I would say that's one of the key differentiators of this system. And I think cloud-based deployment of AI really is primed to just change our complete understanding of the workflow for AI and endoscopy, because we need to move away from this standalone hardware system each time there's a new application, each time there's a new updated version of an existing application. And with this cloud-based workflow, we can get continuously new updates every time there's a release of these algorithms. Anytime there's a new application for AI, it can be deployed on the back end. So as the front-end user, I can have access to the latest piece of kit at all time. And I think that's one of the key strengths from a technical perspective. But I think also from a clinical perspective, there's uniqueness in how the algorithm was developed. So something that, if you like, I've had the privilege of being involved with from the start. And so from quite early on, when we developed the polyp CAD-E system, we envisaged that it wasn't just important to improve the detection of your diminutive or smaller polyps, but actually for your much more clinically significant polyps. So your SSLs, your large polyps, your large adenomas. So when we actually developed the algorithm, roughly about 20% of that algorithm was trained with those clinically significant polyps, in the hope that when it's evaluated in the clinical arena, we'd see real important clinical change.
So it's almost like, sometimes it's dependent on us as users to update our systems, get the reminders, and then update our operating systems. And for a while we ignore that and we just keep going. And with this system, is everything really being done kind of you're not even aware that you are constantly being updated? You're not waiting to hear what the guidelines are. You're not waiting to get validation or have to worry about that?
Yes, it's a really good question. So I would break that down into two parts. Okay, so one of the issues with a local hardware deployment workflow is it actually discourages the vendor from updating its algorithm. Okay, because if I have an update of the algorithm tomorrow, it means I have to most likely manually go to all sites and update the software and the hardware, or it means all sites need to buy a replacement piece of hardware, right? So it discourages the vendor from innovation, in my opinion. So that's the first aspect of it. From the second aspect of it, I think it's always important to give control to the endoscopist. So I don't envisage a pathway where the algorithm is updated without the permission of the endoscopist. So I think probably the closest analogy I have is when we get updates on our phone to update the software. It always asks for permission from the user as to whether they want to update that algorithm. And so that's how I envisage the updated workflow for a cloud-based deployment to be.
So this all sounds wonderful. Tell us about sort of any application or any data that is available using this system and the advantages, or maybe not, that it shows.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the landmark study to allude to is the Eagle trial. So we really wanted to robustly evaluate this cloud-based concept, because I think the natural inclination from clinicians working in healthcare systems is to have anxiety as to whether this cloud-based deployment that relies on the hospital's internet infrastructure, is it really up to scratch? And so to really robustly evaluate that, we did a randomized controlled trial in 4 countries in Europe, so spread across East and Western Europe, Poland, Germany, Italy and Spain, with a total of 8 centres, and the idea there is that we're providing a lot of sites with different types of setup in terms of internet infrastructure to really see if this cloud-based concept actually worked. So that's the setting for the Eagle trial. I think the second thing is with polyp detection CAD-E, and it's probably going a little bit into the technical detail, it's probably one of the most robust evaluations of the cloud-based concept. Because if you can imagine, there's anywhere between 25 to 50 frames per second out your endoscopy processor. All of those images need to be upstream to the cloud, processed in real time, and if appropriate, a bounding box be fed back to your monitor. And all of that needs to happen in less than 100 milliseconds for me to see that bounding box in real time and not notice a lag. Okay, so we try to evaluate in a multinational setup, in an application of AI, of which is a real robust assessment of the cloud-based concept. And actually what we found is in this study, which had more than 840 patients across these 8 sites, is when we looked at all of the procedures, so more than 31,000 minutes of colonoscopy, 99.7% of the time per minute had a detection latency below 100 milliseconds. So you get a near perfect performance across 8 centres spread across Europe. When you actually look at all of the individual procedures, 840 procedures had an average detection latency, I think, of about in the mid-50s millisecond. So that's real-time performance for you. And I think there was only one single individual procedure out of those 841 which had an average detection latency of above 100 millisecond. So it was a really nice study that highlighted to me and hopefully the rest of the endoscopy community that the healthcare infrastructure is ready for this cloud-based deployment. And it's quite technical into how the algorithm actually works and the workflow works, but ultimately the way in which the data is transmitted from your processor to a computer up to a cloud, it's very much optimized to have a very ultra low requirement in terms of the internet communication to the cloud and back. And I think that was, from a technical perspective, what was really novel about the Eagle trial. But we also had some very interesting clinical results going back to the concept into how we actually developed the algorithm. So I think we've seen, there's been more than 30 RCTs in this field, and the vast majority show exactly the same thing, right? Polyp CAD-E increases the detection of polyps, particularly adenomas, but the majority of studies are only for your diminutive sized polyps, with a few studies showing for small sized polyps, of which we know have questionable relevance in terms of reducing CRC incidence and PTCRC rates. But what we actually found in this study is we increased the detection of SSLs by almost threefold. We increased the detection of all types of large polyps by more than twofold. And if specifically just looking at large adenomas, we increased that by twofold also. So what we see in this is the cloud-based concept clearly works. Okay, it's feasible and it's ready for implementation. But we can actually see that when you develop an algorithm that's enriched with this data set of those clinically relevant polyps, we can actually really improve the performance for endoscopists by enhancing the detection of those much more relevant polyps, i.e. your large ones and SSLs.
Mm. So basically you're saying, we don't have to worry about the hospital setting, internet connections, that this data that's come out, and we should say as a disclaimer, this is unpublished data so far.
Yep, it's currently in the process of being published, correct. Yep.
Okay. So anything cloud-based, the first question comes up, and I know especially when you're talking with hospital systems and you're sending your data up into the cloud, is what about data security? And also how are we going to regulate all of this? So tell me a little bit about how this system manages that.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I think it's a really important point, first and foremost, and I think it's right that one of the first questions that comes, in my experience, in endoscopist's mind when we're talking about the cloud-based concept, it is security, okay? Because one thing you can't compromise on is data privacy, okay? In terms of how the system and the workflow, if you like, addresses this challenge, is the first thing to say is this CAD-E system, as a cloud-based deployment, is regulatory approved. So it's approved in Europe with MDR accreditation, and it's also had FDA approval, I think in July of last year. So in order to get that regulatory approval for a cloud-based deployment, there's a very rigorous pathway and assessments you have to go through to, if you like, prove to the regulators that this is safe to deploy this algorithm in the cloud and to be transferring this data up and back down to the cloud. So it's gone through that robust assessment for a regulatory perspective, and it's not a one-time assessment. So it's not a case of, you send this off for regulatory approval, you show your security, and then it's signed off for life. So what actually is required is you have regular testing of the data security of that cloud. So I think at least once or twice a year, you will have external companies who will actually try to hack that cloud-based system to see how robust it is. And that's a requirement often by some of the regulators itself. So it's continuously being monitored from a safety perspective. So that's, if you like, from a regulatory aspect. From an actual logistical aspect, one of the things I like about the way that Olympus's CADI system operates is it tries to really minimize that risk in terms of the workflow. So only anonymous data is sent up to the cloud. And what I mean by this is when you have your endoscopy screen, it's just the main video feed which is sent to the cloud. So you don't have any of that patient identifiable data that you often see on the left-hand side of the screen. None of that is sent to the cloud, okay? It's just that main endoscopy video feed which is capturing what's at the end of the scope. So you only have anonymous data going up to the cloud, first and foremost. Secondly, the data isn't stored in the cloud, okay? So data is transmitted from the endoscopy processor, anonymous if you like at source, sent up using your hospital's internet infrastructure to the cloud, and it's not stored there in the cloud. The algorithm will process that data, and then if appropriate, it will then feed back a bounding box. But it's not a case of if I do a colonoscopy procedure on patient X, patient X colonoscopy procedure is now stored in the cloud. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a single transmission up and back down with no local storage at all.
So that actually brings up an interesting point as well about sort of this storage or recording of performance. I think one of the factors that limits adaptability of AI is people feel in a way that they're being policed or worry if it's going to be a constant, someone looking over their shoulder, judging their performance. It sounds to me like with this system, it's not necessarily a collection of how you are doing as an endoscopist, but really a very much more interactive with your case in that moment. Do you think that is the case?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that statement. So I think it all depends on what the application it is that we're discussing. So with polyp CAD-E, there's no analysis there in terms of how you actually perform. It is literally just there as a support tool, right, to help you detect some polyps which you may have missed otherwise, and that's the primary function of it. Obviously, when we go into other applications of AI, so CAQs, computer-aided quality metrics, some of these systems can, for example, automate withdrawal time, automate bowel prep scoring, and you can envisage a future many years from now where we are really going into the detail of capturing each individual endoscopist's performance. So I always say my vision in the future is that actually, you don't have a mean ADR or mean adenoma per colonoscopy. You have, for each segment of the bowel, what is your adenoma detection rate, your large adenoma detection rate, your small SSL, your large SSL detection rate for each single segment of the bowel. How much time have you spent on average in the cecum, in the hepatic flexure, in the transverse? So for sure, what I envisage as the best way of providing clinical care is reaching that point in the far future. But that will take time till we get there. In terms of today, the application of polyp CAD-E is very much just there to support us as endoscopists to reduce the miss rate of polyps. And we know we miss a lot of polyps. So I think there's a meta-analysis which shows, I think the adenoma miss rate was around 24% in a meta-analysis of random tandem studies. SSL polyps, it's about 25%. I think when it comes to large polyps, large adenomas, this meta-analysis was somewhere in the region of 6 to 9%. So we know we are missing these polyps, and this system is really just there to help support us to hopefully reduce that miss rate.
So who do you think this is for? Is this for trainees as
Yeah.
they're learning colonoscopy? Is it
Mhm.
for people who have been out
Yeah.
20 years and are tired, or
Yeah,
who is this? Who is our target audience?
It's a fantastic question. So I always really enjoy this idea of who benefits from this, and who's it actually intended for. So I think there's no question that it will benefit our novice endoscopists, and there's been studies that have shown that whilst an endoscopist is in their phase of training and learning how to do a colonoscopy, it improves their ADR as well as other metrics. We know in non-expert endoscopists from meta-analysis it improves their performance, but actually what meta-analysis and studies showed, it actually enhances the performance of experts as well. Now I do take that there is a ceiling effect to how much you can improve an expert, but the data is very much there in that it does help increase their detection of polyps. Naturally with experts it will be more your smaller and diminutive polyps, whereas with your general and lower detectors it's going to improve detection of much larger polyps. But a good example is the EAGLE study. So all 22 endoscopists were experienced endoscopists, and we had experts at the very highest level, and you saw improvements in the majority of cohorts when you actually did a sub-analysis by ADR. So I know experts will often say it will not benefit them and they don't believe it will benefit them, but I think you always have to look at the science, and the science tells us that actually at all levels of performance it improves our polyp detection rate. It's just what that increase in magnitude of increases will vary between the different cohorts, but I'm yet to ever be convinced or seen evidence that there's an endoscopist it does not help, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That's great. Well, this has been a really fantastic discussion and very exciting and a little inspiring for what's out there in the future. I really appreciate it, and best of luck with your continued work.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for the opportunity today. It's a real pleasure.
So thanks for listening, and stay tuned. We'll be back next week with another episode.